stronger than a loaded gun, but they'll twist the rules until they've won. From Georgia's purge to Texas shame, they change.
Special welcome to you, the learner, for joining us on today's exploration into the source material. We've got a really fascinating one lined up today.
We really do. We're going to be unpacking a massive 11-part civic documentary called the Cassandra series, Breaking Apollo's Curse.
Right. Authored by John R. Brakey and Ken Bennett. And the whole mission today is to distill this massive text. The central premise they're arguing is that, blind trust in democratic institutions just isn't cutting it anymore.
Yeah, they're saying that a complete shift to what they call public verification is really the only way to cure this modern condition they call the Cassandra Syndrome. But before we dive into all that, we need to put a quick disclaimer out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this material touches directly on U.S. elections.
Yeah.
Which is obviously an incredibly politically charged topic right now. So we just want to be crystal clear. Our goal today is absolutely not to take sides or, endorse the author's viewpoints or validate any specific political claims.
Yeah, we are strictly here to impartially unpack the mechanical, the philosophical, and the historical ideas in this text. We just want you, the learner, to understand the exact arguments being made about election transparency, totally neutral.
Exactly. Just looking at what the source material actually says.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we're not starting with voting machines or ballots, right? We're actually starting with psychology.
Yeah, the title itself is a huge clue. The Cassandra series. It goes back to Greek mythology.
Right, the prophet Cassandra. She was cursed by Apollo, right?
She was. She was given the gift of prophecy. But the curse was that no one would ever believe her warnings. And the authors use this to point out that historically, the real tragedy isn't usually a lack of evidence.
It's that people just don't want to look at it.
Exactly. The warnings are just too uncomfortable. The author, John R. Brakey, he actually approaches this whole thing from his background as a therapist, which I think is a super interesting angle.
Yeah, he was a teenage runaway, too, which the text points out.
Yeah, right. And he learned early on in his life and his therapy practice that people avoid difficult truths simply because change is incredibly painful. They'd rather just, ignore the smoke and hope the fire goes away.
It's so true. It's kind of like putting off a visit to the doctor because you're terrified of what the diagnosis might be. Like ignoring the weird pain in your knee doesn't actually fix the knee.
No, it definitely doesn't.
It just delays the healing process and probably makes it worse.
What's fascinating here is how this whole psychological framework basically sets up their entire argument about institutional resistance. They argue that institutions act the exact same way.
Right, they resist change.
Yeah, and to counter that fear of change, Brakey uses this guiding philosophy, which is there are no bad ideas, only better ideas.
I really like that approach.
He even talks about using the Lakota prayer as a way to find grounding. It's a way to quiet the ego and approach these really tough institutional questions with humility, instead of coming at them with fear or anger.
Which is so necessary when you're talking about something as tense as elections. And that theoretical search for truth, it had a very real collision course with practical election mechanics. The text talks about this massive light bulb moment in a 2015 lawsuit.
Oh, yeah. This is a pivotal part of the documentary. There was this 2015 lawsuit where Judge Gordon asked a super simple but just profoundly impactful question.
I have the quote right here. He asked, if you take voted ballots, make copies of them, and use those copies to count votes, what makes you think that you can destroy them?
Such a straightforward question, but it completely caused a massive paradigm shift. Because before that, these digital ballot images, they were just viewed as like administrative records.
Just digital paperwork taking up server space?
Exactly. Stuff you just delete to save memory. But suddenly, they stopped being seen as mere records and started being viewed as fundamental evidence.
Evidence of the voter's actual intent. And that realization birthed what the authors call the golden rule of democracy.
Right, which states that the act of voting must remain strictly secret.
But the counting of those votes must be entirely public.
Yes.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, because I'm going to push back on that for a second.
Go for it.
Wait. If we are demanding that everything about the counting process becomes public evidence, aren't we inherently threatening the secret ballot? Like, what about voter privacy?
That is always the first question people ask, and the text addresses it head on by diving into the actual data and the tech. They bring in Ken Bennett, a former Arizona Secretary of State.
Right. He outlines the 5 key steps to verified elections.
Yeah, and steps 4 and 5 are the crucial ones here. They focus on matching digital ballot images to something called cast vote records, and then verifying those with the actual physical paper.
We should probably pause and clarify the difference between a cast vote record, or CVR, and a ballot image, because the authors make a huge distinction there.
They do. A cast vote record is essentially just a spreadsheet. It's a highly alterable summary of the votes that a machine generates.
So it's just data rows.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas the ballot image is a literal digital photograph of the physical paper ballot. It visually shows the exact physical intent of the voter.
I like to think of it like this. A CVR spreadsheet is basically a printed restaurant receipt. It just says, cheeseburger, $10. A machine printed it, and someone could easily hack the system and type in salad instead.
Right, it's just text.
But the ballot image is an actual photograph of the food on your plate. It's undeniable physical proof that you were served a cheeseburger. But that brings me back to the privacy thing. If everyone can look at the photograph of my plate, don't they know I'm the one who ordered it?
Well, this is where the software comes in. The authors advocate for something called ABE, which stands for Auditable Ballot Examination.
Okay, ABE.
And it isn't some crazy complex AI. It literally just uses Excel macros to organize these two data sets side by side.
Yep.
It locks the spreadsheet data to the corresponding photograph so humans can just visually verify that they match.
Oh, I see.
And as for the privacy concern, they cite a 2023 academic study by Kuriwaki, Lewis, and Morse. They analyzed the 2020 Maricopa County election.
And what did they find?
They proved that 99.83% of individual ballot records remain completely anonymous, even if they are made entirely public.
Wait, 99.83%. That's incredibly high.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the authors are trying to show that this technology isn't being used to replace human trust. It's being used to facilitate human verification. The math actually proves that transparency and privacy can coexist.
Okay, so the math checks out, the privacy is safe, it's literally just Excel macros and photos. So, why isn't every county in America just doing this tomorrow? It seems so straightforward.
Well, that gets us into the whole issue of insider threats and institutional resistance. We go right back to that Cassandra Syndrome. There's this really telling anecdote from 2008 in the text.
Oh, right, with the elections director.
Yeah, John Brakey was investigating elections in Maricopa County, and the elections director at the time, Karen Osborne, basically told him to back off. Her exact words were something like, "John, you just need to learn to trust me."
Just learn to trust me. Wow.
Right.
That is the ultimate demand for blind faith from an institution.
And the authors frame that response as a classic symptom of organizational groupthink. It's a culture where conformity is rewarded and any kind of critical inquiry is seen as an attack.
They actually use a great quote from Grace Hopper in this section, don't they?
Yes, the pioneer computer scientist. She said, "The most dangerous phrase in the language is, 'We've always done it this way.'"
And that danger gets really real when the text brings in the findings from trial attorney Bill Risner.
Oh, this part was wild.
Yeah. Risner found that federal testing labs are actually instructed by voting system vendors not to look for security flaws. They are literally relying on security by obscurity.
Which is terrifying when you consider what the text points out next. Every major study identifies insiders, so internal employees and vendors, as the primary threat to computer voting security.
Exactly. So if the system's own experts and attorneys acknowledge that internal employees and vendors are the absolute biggest security threat, how can just trust me possibly be the accepted institutional standard?
You're trusting the exact people who pose the highest risk.
It makes no sense.
The authors argue that this exact kind of logical disconnect is what destroys republics, and they actually tie this specific modern audit issue back to a really famous historical warning.
Abraham Lincoln's Lyceum Address from 1838, right?
Yes. Lincoln warned that the greatest threat to a constitutional republic isn't a foreign army invading us. The real threat is the internal erosion of the rule of law.
Basically dying by suicide. If citizens lose respect for their institutions, the whole thing just crumbles from the inside out.
Exactly. And the text points out a very specific present-day example of this happening mechanically. They talk about the audit sequence flaw currently happening in Arizona.
Right, because of how they pull the samples.
Yeah, early ballot samples, which make up about 90% of the vote, are being selected for the audit before the complete election results are publicly committed.
So wait, they know which batches are going to be audited before the final totals are locked in.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for the audit itself?
Well, the authors propose a very simple fix. Commit first, audit second, verify third. This raises an important question, right? Like, how do we even define a valid audit? Because proper sequencing is the bedrock of auditing, whether you're in finance or healthcare or elections.
Oh, for sure. It's like letting a student grade their own math test before they've officially handed their final answers to the teacher.
That's a perfect way to put it.
If the student knows the teacher is only going to double check questions 5, 10, and 15, they'll just make sure those 3 are perfectly correct, and they could just alter the other 97 questions. You have to hand in the test first. You have to commit the results before the audit begins.
Exactly. And that really brings us to the core takeaway of this entire documentary series. For the learner listening right now, the overarching message here is that transparent verification is not an attack on democracy.
No, it's a protective measure.
It protects the public's faith, and frankly, it protects honest election officials from wild rumors. The authors firmly believe that Americans should never be asked to blindly trust what they cannot independently verify.
Imagine boarding an airplane. You find your seat, you buckle up, and the pilot comes over the intercom and says, "Hey, welcome aboard."
Right.
And then they say, "Just so you know, we decided to skip the pre-flight checklist today. We just have a lot of faith in this plane, so sit back and relax."
Yeah, I mean, most of us would immediately be sprinting for the emergency exit.
Exactly. Because in aviation, checking the systems isn't, an insult to the airplane. It is literally how you stay alive.
Right. It is just standard everyday practice.
But for you, the learner, you know that when we step into the realm of democracy and civic duty, checking those same systems is suddenly treated like, well, an act of treason.
Oh, absolutely. It makes people incredibly defensive.
It really does.
There's a line drawn deep across this land, not with rifles but by sleight of hand. No uniforms, no battle drums, just laws and lies where the silence comes.
Early, so well, I'll feed you early. Come on.
They gerrymander maps in the dead of night, hold flood relief to force a fight. And when the people rise to stand and speak, they purge the rolls and cut the wheat. The new Civil War isn't with bullets, it's with ballots. They don't storm gates, they just quietly callous. They erase your name with a keystroke sting while the tyrants crown themselves as kings. Yeah, the fight is quiet, but the stakes are loud. It's the vote they fear, so they thin the crowd. A check mark's stronger than a loaded gun, but they'll twist the rules until they've won. From Georgia's purge to Texas shame, they change the field, not play the game. They call it integrity, dressed in deceit, but justice don't live in that kind of cheat. It's not red versus blue, it's right versus wrong, and silence won't last where we raise our song. The new Civil War isn't with bullets, it's with ballots. And every name they drop is a stolen palace. But we remember who bled for this line, and we won't back down, not this time. It's the vote they fear, the voice, the spark will bring the light. They can keep the dark. This is how a nation evolves. The new Civil War isn't with bullets, it's with ballots.